welcome to In the News for September 3rd, 2021. I am Brett Burney from appsandlaw.com.
Hi, this is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD, currently coming to you from Alabama, not New Orleans.
Oh my goodness. Jeff, okay, first and foremost, it's good to hear from you. It's good to know that you and your family are safe. Probably most of the listeners know that Jeff is in New Orleans or was in New Orleans. It is his home base. He's not there right now. So Jeff, I mean, I hate to just kind of start off with some dreaded news, but boy, it's been a little bit of a wild week, I think, for you this past week.
It has been.
Yeah.
And for people listening, I do not have my nice microphone. My nice microphone is in my office, which is on the 46th floor of a building with no power. So suffice it to say, I could not set that
there you go.
Before I left home. So I'm just using my AirPods. And if anyone's watching the video version of this, I have the video turned off for now, just because I'm on limited bandwidth. But the important thing is we're safe and stuff, and everything is good. But what a mess! What a mess! But what I was going to talk about in the beginning, Brett, was let's put aside the human angle and people that died, and Hurricane Ida was not only a horrible thing in Louisiana, but I see on the news that there's flooding in Florida and in New York,
even. Yep.
Oh my goodness, what a mess! What a mess! But there, as often when you're in these horrible situations, technology can really be useful. And so I thought I might talk about something that works for you. Yeah,
absolutely. Go for it. Just as good. Yeah. So and then just tell us, even so, it's been this whole week, right? You've been relocated. Is that right? Or kind of, give us just a quick little background and then jump into how that technology has helped you.
Yeah, no, we relocated just a few days ago, although we were in New Orleans during the storm. One of the things is that, and it just gives so many memories for me of Hurricane Katrina 16 years ago. Hurricane Katrina, I remember like it was yesterday, that it was also a Friday, and I knew there was a hurricane out there, but we thought it was just going to be a hurricane for Florida. Little did we know that it would hop over Florida and then come up to New Orleans. And I remember my wife and I even I had actually left work earlier that day. We went to a movie, and then we got out of the movie, and suddenly I'm looking at my phone and seeing emails about, wow, we might have a hurricane here. And it very quickly went from, oh, there might be to a hurricane to, oh my goodness, this could be a really big hurricane. And the same thing happened with Hurricane Ida. I was actually traveling last weekend. And so when I left town Friday morning, again, I knew there was a hurricane out there, but New Orleans wasn't really in the target path. And, we figured it would be okay. So I had to go up to North Carolina. And the first way that the technology, Apple technology, really came in useful for me is I was in North Carolina, and it was on Saturday. Saturday morning, I was in a meeting. And I have a service called TripIt Pro. TripIt is an app that I've used for many years. It's a great app that you can take when you travel, you can take your plane reservation, your hotel reservation, your rental car, and you just forward it to TripIt, and TripIt will put it into a nice little itinerary for you, just so it's nice and neat. But what is if you subscribe to the Pro service, which is $50, one of the nice things is it becomes much more proactive. It's almost like a travel agent. They will monitor flights, and they will give you alerts, and they will tell you if things change. You can even have them tell you if a better seat on a plane becomes available. And I was in my meeting on Saturday morning, and TripIt Pro gave me an alert that the flight that I was going to be taking home later that day, I was flying to Atlanta, and then from Atlanta to New Orleans, that my Atlanta to New Orleans flight was canceled, which makes sense because I think Delta and a bunch of the other airlines, they didn't want to have their planes in New Orleans for this hurricane. And so, but the nice thing about TripIt Pro is it gave me a notice immediately, long before I got a notice any other way. And I've been through this rodeo before. I knew what to do. So I immediately, excused myself, jumped out of the meeting, immediately jumped on the Delta app. And again, calling Delta Airlines throughout the pandemic calling anybody throughout the pandemic has been difficult. But the nice thing about the app is you can jump on, you can immediately see, in fact, it even took a second for the app to realize TripIt knew before the Delta app knew that my flight was canceled. But once Delta caught up, I was able to rebook, and I got a flight that was going to leave in like 45 minutes. Now that means I got to get to the airport in 45 minutes. You got to book it. So I'm grabbing my stuff. I jump out to grab a car. The place I'm at says, the only way to get to the airport is to use either Lyft or Uber. So, and Uber had no cars, but the Lyft app was working. And Lyft, I've never used this service before, Brett. Maybe you have, but on Lyft, when you call a car, there's this thing called priority pickup. and it says, would you like to pay an extra $5 to be first in
Yes,
line?
please.
I'm like, yes, I would. Yes, I would. And so sure enough, within like 3 minutes, the car is there and I get to the airport, and it even told me in the app afterwards, it's like, you saved 18 minutes by using priority pickup. And I'm like,
Ooh,
I would not have gotten to
well
my
worth the money
without that
right.
18 minutes. So, through that series of technology, TripIt Pro, the Delta app, and Lyft, my iPhone saved my bacon and got me home so that I could be with my family. And then as we're getting home, that's when I started to realize this was going to be a big storm. This was going to be a big one.
I just want to quickly say, TripIt, I'm so glad you talked about this, and I can see you reviewed this even originally way back in 2013. I know when you and I have presented together, we've used this usually as one of the apps that we always recommend. And I had the free service. I still have the free service. I did pay for the pro service a couple of years ago when I was really traveling a lot, because the exact same experience, Jeff. I remember specifically I was in the airport waiting on a flight, and TripIt told me this flight was canceled before anybody else at that gate knew about it. In fact, I immediately went to the gate to the desk there, and I was able to like get at the front of the line, because immediately, about not even 2 minutes after that, everybody got the announcement, and I was the first in line of about like 200 people doing that. It is well worth the money if it's something that you are doing, the traveling aspect on that. So that's a great story to hear how that goes. But I'm a big fan of TripIt. Again, even if you just sign up for the free version, doesn't give you those updates quite as often, but it's a great way that it's where I put everything anytime. And what's great about it too is that when you get a booking from a flight or a car rental, just like you said, I just forward it all to TripIt, and it's in one place. It's like my little binder that I used to carry around, right, with all of the information. So, okay, so you finally got home to New Orleans, and fortunately got home. So then what?
Yeah, and this is where I make the decision of, do we evacuate or do we stay? And
goodness.
it was uncertain of what to do. We decided to stay because I thought, look, at that point, the path was not coming right our way. It was coming towards Grand Isle and some other places. We knew that we were going to get some big winds, but our house is strong, and we knew that we were going to lose power. But, you could be without power for a while. So we made the decision to stay. In retrospect, if we had known everything that was going to happen afterwards, we would have left. But we figured we'd lose power for a day or something, like often, and then come right back. And so sure enough, on Sunday at noon, we lost power at my house. And but we still had at that point all of our mobile devices. Self-service was still working, and so we were using just some backup batteries, like I think I mentioned in my post today, some of the Anchor batteries, which are nice. But every portable battery that I had in my house, we collected them all and we used them all.
You had them all,
and so we were still able to keep up with the news and listen to what was going on. It was good enough for even to stream video from the local TV station. So we were getting ready. And then so Sunday night the storm hits, and it was quite a storm. It was a lot of wind and stuff. It was pretty interesting. And so then Monday we have the day afterwards, and this is when normally we would be saying, okay, so when is the power going to be coming back? But two things that went on. First of all, and this was so distressing, that cell service for AT&T, which is what I use, just went out. I mean, there was no, I guess their towers went down or something. And I don't have, I know sometimes people say, oh, well, I have AT&T, but I also have like Verizon on my iPad, or I have a Verizon hotspot. I wish in retrospect I had two different things, but I didn't. So we were completely cut off from communication. There was no power. We had no idea what's going on.
What a feeling.
In my tip today, later on at the end of our podcast, I'm going to talk about a radio that we use to listen to the outside world. But we could not communicate with loved ones. It was really a pain.
Oh boy.
And then finally around Monday afternoon, I noticed that I would just, in the corner of my iPhone, I would sort of get a signal for a second, and then it would go away. And I'm like, okay, let's see, what can we do with this? And so that's when I realized that if I turned on, AT&T was just slowly starting to get a very, very few of their cell towers up. And I noticed that if I went into airplane mode and I waited a couple of seconds and then turned off airplane mode so that my iPhone would search for a tower, I could get a signal that would last about a minute or two, enough to try to get a text out to people. And sometimes, I couldn't. Often I would send a text using the Messages app, and it uses, iMessage, the blue bubbles, right? And it would tell me it wouldn't go through. But then if I chose an option to send it as a traditional text message, the green bubble, that would
right?
sometimes go through. So
Oh,
I was
interesting.
sometimes sending those through. And so I went through this. I mentioned earlier this week that I actually created a quick little shortcut on my iPhone. It
Yeah.
was the most simple shortcut you could have. It had 3 steps. The first step is turn on airplane mode, then wait 10 seconds, then turn off airplane mode, because I get sick and tired of pressing those
I've
buttons.
got it on the screen.
And
You wrote about this what on Wednesday, right? On the
on
1st of
Wednesday, right?
September. This is a
Yeah.
great little post here, Jeff. Yeah, but yeah, you have a screenshot of that shortcut that you created.
Could not be any more simple, but that way I could just press one button, let the phone do its thing, and I would just stare at the top right corner of the phone. And most of the time, I didn't get a signal, but sometimes I did. And then I could try
Right?
to communicate with my dad and my sister and people like that and make plans.
Oh
So
my
that was,
goodness.
for the win. So another thing that was really nice then too, Brett, is my Apple Watch, because you don't want to just stand there forever and just stare at your phone. And
Right.
especially after the storm on Monday, we've got trees everywhere. We've got we're
Right.
picking up debris, and
Oh
we're
my
we had
goodness.
some roof leaks we're dealing with. So we're dealing with all that
Oh,
stuff. But with my Apple Watch, when that once every 30 minutes, 45 minutes, when a text would come through, I would instantly
right.
get it on my Apple Watch,
Oh,
just
okay.
because of the Bluetooth connection to my phone. So that was
Right.
nice, to have that working. So that's some technology that we used in the immediate aftermath. But once it became clear that power is currently off in just about all of New Orleans, and is going to be, I
Oh
mean, I
my
hate to say this
goodness.
out loud, Brett, but some people are estimating like 3 weeks. I mean, I don't know how long I'm going to be gone from home. It's a total mess.
Whoa.
So
Whoa.
so we decided on, we weren't really supposed to leave. The mayor said everybody stay in place on Monday, but by Tuesday, you could start to move around. And so that's what we did. We left town, and
Okay.
we chose a place. I mean, we couldn't even find a place because our communication was so limited. My sister had already evacuated, and she found a place in Alabama, and it was so nice to get that text message from her saying, "I have a place for you. Just come." I'm like, "Thank
Yay.
goodness,
Oh
yay!"
my
So
goodness.
here we
Wow.
are, and so now we're set up, and so now we're just in a
Oh
relocation
my.
mode. It's much like if you're on
Okay.
vacation. What do you take with you?
Right.
I've One of my useful things
Oh,
that we talk about all the time is one of these Anchor power ports that you plug it
yes.
into an outlet, and you get like 4 or 5 or 6 like USB things, because obviously there's limited space and you want to be able to charge a bunch of things at once, and so that's really nice
I
to have.
love this, by the way.
Yeah.
I have it. I love it.
Yeah. So, and
Yeah.
there's different models. The one that you're showing on the screen now was from a few years ago. But those are useful things whenever you're traveling, let alone evacuating. But so anyway, it's been quite a ride. And but again, the
Oh,
technology, thank goodness, because we wouldn't have known where to go. We would have had no communication. And I do wish, in retrospect, it would have been nice. I've always had an iPad that only has Wi-Fi, except for the very,
right.
very first iPad in 2010, where I had one with built-in cellular. Because
Right.
most of the time, I don't need cellular on an iPad.
Right.
I just connect via to my phone. But in retrospect, if I had a cellular iPad, and if I used a different service
Right.
from, if I used Verizon or T-Mobile or something,
Right.
again, not how many times in your lifetime do you have these situations, but that would have been nice to have like an
Right.
alternative cell something or other. That's just one thing.
Yeah, I hear you. In fact, again, when I used to travel a little bit more, I'm the same as you. All of my phones are on AT&T, and I'm the same way. I used to get cellular on my iPads. I just didn't feel like that I needed it as much. So I just do Wi-Fi's now. But I used to also, in addition, would carry Verizon used to have, I think they call it the Jetpack, right? Or it's a MiFi. I think that's what AT&T calls. But it was a little like a
Right.
wireless router, and that's the way that I got around some of the things that you're talking about, Jeff. I don't do that anymore. I think I still have it. I just let it, expire, and I didn't re-up it. But that did save my bacon in some instances. Again, not not from a tragedy like what you're talking about, but when I was traveling and my AT&T just wasn't getting the right coverage or wasn't as good, I would use that little jetpack to be able to connect. I would just turn that on, and then now my iPad and my iPhone would go through that. I mean, I almost hate to say that that's like where we are, that we have to have two different devices to be able to know that we have coverage. But as you're talking about, it really would have, it potentially could have helped you in that situation, because you don't know it, you wouldn't know any different. But if you had it, at least you would be able to try it, and that would be another option there. I mean, in other
Yeah.
words,
And this reminds me,
yeah.
I was just going to say that one of the, I try not to talk too much about Apple rumors on the website, because there's always rumors and half the time they're false,
Right.
right?
Always.
But
Right.
one of the rumors that came out this week, I don't know if you saw it. I did not post about it, and I think it was Mark Gurman from Bloomberg, so a little bit more better track record.
Trustworthy,
He
right?
says that trustworthy. One of the I don't think it's going to be the iPhone necessarily that comes out, this year, but his rumor was that an upcoming iPhone was going to work with satellites. Now, how this would work, I don't know, but what he reported is that, satellite, it would be just for emergency services, that if you were in a situation where you don't have cellular, your iPhone could still communicate with satellites to do things like 911 or emergency services, and maybe even something else. I don't know what the story is on this, and who knows how it's going to come out. But gosh, I tell you, if we had something like that, I mean, if I had an allocation of you have 5 satellite text messages that you can send, that would have been amazing when the cellular is out. So who knows what's going to come down the road, but it's certainly an interesting, it's a very intriguing rumor.
I saw some of this as well, and I was wondering if we were going to talk about this because it is just a rumor still, and you appropriately acknowledge that. But yeah, I saw it, and they would say that, it's satellites, it's like low orbit, and it's very little data. But man, I saw many stories blowing up about this, because we would almost do a little bit of an in run around some of the towers, the cellular towers that we have to deal with. And frankly, I think I almost kind of like it, because then you don't have to you have to decide between T-Mobile or Verizon or AT&T or Sprint or whatever. In other words, you would just have, the satellite. Now, I don't doubt this. In fact, I was very intrigued, and I am very intrigued. I don't know if this is going to be coming anytime very soon, but in my mind, it would almost just completely make sense, right? Like you said, if you had the ability to be able to communicate that way in some kind of an emergency like this, like what you just have experienced over this past week, that would be a godsend to be able to do that. If nothing else, just to be able to get information and news. It's just like you said, what I find a little horrific, but just amazing, is that your iPhones were the way that you were getting information, receiving information from the outside world, and as well as communicating. Like, in other words, it has replaced your TV, your radio. Well, maybe not. We'll talk about that in a moment. But it's replaced like newspapers and ways to get it. Like, all of that information comes through your phone, and we rely on that so much. And it's just been amazing to kind of listen to your story here over this past week. And it's not done yet, I know. But the fact that you're able to do that, you're able to make phone calls from where you are. It's just amazing that the technology, like you said, has changed so much now. I cannot believe it's been 16 years since Katrina, but we just were starting to look at some of that technology back then, and it's amazing what you've been able to do with it now this past week.
One thing that just occurs to me as you were speaking, Brett, is how Apple, they always say, likes to control the whole widget. Like, anything that's important to them, they want to control. That's why they're making their own processors now and everything else. What a very important part of an iPhone is the internet, the cellular connection. I wonder, is it possible that step 1 is using satellites for emergency stuff, and then step 2 down the road would be Apple owns the satellites, sort of like Elon Musk, and they can cut out the AT&T and Verizon.
I thought
they
the
can
same
control
thing.
Who knows?
Right.
I don't know. I'm just spitballing here, but you never know. Maybe
if they can make a self-driving car, they can certainly build some satellites. I've thought the exact same thing, Jeff. And if there's one company that's got enough in the pockets to finance a satellite, it could be Apple. Anyway, I thought the same thing. It's interesting you came to that conclusion as well. I think that'll be interesting. Oh, my goodness. Well, thanks again for sharing all of that, Jeff. I mean, if nothing else, it's just, first of all, it's good to hear the story. Everybody's safe, obviously, from the human aspect. But just amazing to hear how you've been utilizing the technology available in there. And thanks for writing about it, too. Like this post you had a couple of days ago was amazing, setting up this the shortcut for the airplane switch. And wow. I mean, you can't be the only one, obviously, in New Orleans that's been able to access the technology this way. So that's great. Thanks for sharing all of that. So there have been a few other stories in the news that amazingly you continue to have still followed, Jeff, which is just amazing. You're my hero on this. But one of the things that you did post about on your post in the news post was something that Apple has been announcing. I found this to be fascinating as well, but absolutely appropriate. It's amazing to me how much more I have started to use the Apple Wallet and all my credit cards in the Apple Wallet. I love it, almost to the point where I almost get annoyed when I have to pull out my wallet and pull out a physical credit card today. But
Agreed.
Apple is going to that next step now, that instead of just using it for credit cards, they announced a couple of days ago that now you can start putting in your driver's license, your state IDs. This is a pretty amazing story on this.
Yeah, this is neat stuff because you can already just put a copy. I think there's a way right now you can put a copy of your license in there just as a picture. But with this technology but what Apple's coming out with is truly a digital driver's license, so that it's authenticated, it's TSA approved, it's everything else. And much like you would, the post that I linked to from John Gruber is good because he describes it.
Yes.
I think he had some press briefings with Apple. But much like, we're all used to taking your iPhone and putting it next to a reader in like a Walgreens to pay or something using Apple Pay. It's the same idea. You would put it next to a reader to like get on a plane, for example, and you would see on your screen, the other person would like to get the following information from you, your name, your date of birth, your whatever. And you could see some people would ask for more, some people would ask for less, and you can see exactly what they're going to get. And if you double click the button on the side or put your finger on the button for the Touch ID phones, then you would send the information just like you send a payment. And so it's incredibly secure. It's very private. You're only giving the other side what they need to know when they need to know it. And it's got all the other advantages of a digital wallet. I mean, I've mentioned just on a show or two ago that, here in Louisiana, we have a digital wallet here, which is nice because I don't have to worry about having my driver's license with me. I can just show it. And in fact, the Louisiana one is nice because it even has your COVID status on it. And I've been using that because, certain restaurants, every restaurant in New Orleans, well, nowadays, with no power, there's no restaurants in New Orleans, but up until a few days ago, you could, prove that your COVID status by just showing on your phone, which was very nice. But this looks like the future. And I really think this will be cool if it takes off.
In this John Gruber article was great. And he always does a good job of kind of highlighting certain aspects of any kind of an Apple announcement. First of all, which I just found amazing, that Apple announced Apple Pay 7 years ago. I guess
time flies.
I don't know why. First of all, I guess at one hand, I can't believe it's been that long, and on the other hand, it's like, wow, that's been with us for such a long time. But one of his points that I think he makes in here is that it does take time, right? What did he say? Somehow he said it in here that it's a lot of communicating with people. It's a lot of making sure that everybody's comfortable with it. That kind of an aspect on that. But it is to the point today where we are using that. Again, I am almost almost any store that I go to, because I can even do it from my Apple Watch as well, which is just so darn convenient, and I trust it so much more. Now, the one thing that Gruber points out in here as well is that immediately I can imagine some listeners are like, well, I don't want to hand my wallet over to a TSA or a police officer or something like that. And what's great about it is that you don't. In fact, Gruber even says you would never hand it over. But because even if you did hand it, they wouldn't be able to pull up the information that they need, because it requires your Face ID or a Touch ID, and that can happen only if it's in your hands, right? If you have that way to authenticate it on there, which is
just a pause on that for Brett. I mean, the issue that people are concerned about is if you're concerned about your privacy, if you hand over your phone in an unlocked state to somebody else, they can then you have voluntarily given them your phone, and they can look at whatever they want on there. Whereas if you keep your phone in your own possession and you keep it locked when you're, that way if someone else took it, they in theory can't break into it. Now, we all know that the cops have some equipment that in some situations can break into a phone, but you make their job that much harder. So again, I'm not saying that you necessarily want to hide yourself from cops, but just if you're worried about privacy, the nice thing is that, like everything Apple does, privacy is baked into this. Apple is balancing that you want to provide the information. Of course you want to provide it. Just like when you pay, you want to give them money, but you want to do it in a private way that somebody can't scrape your credit card number, because that's all, private and secure and encrypted in Apple Pay. So I love that Apple is applying it. And like you say, Brett, at first, just like 7 years ago, very few people will accept it. And then over time, more will. And the next thing you know, this will just be, it'll just be like, you pay with Apple Pay nowadays. Happens all the time, all the places. So it's interesting.
Yeah, one thing Gruber does is that he puts it in a footnote, but I love this, by the way. You and I have talked about this before, I think, or just briefly we've touched upon it, or I use it as sort of a security trick, like from an ethics standpoint, right? For folks, even from a legal aspect. But know that there are easy ways to like basically deactivate the Face ID or the Touch ID. Maybe that's not the right word to say, but the you know, some people will say, well, what if the cop, you know, or the police officer grabs your phone and then just, you know, points it at your face? Well, yeah, that potentially could work, but as Gruber says in here, you know, if you just press and hold your side button or either volume button for 2 seconds, then it will basically disable the Face ID. It will still work, but you would have to then put in your actual passcode. In other words,
it's just like if you restart the iPhone. Yeah, when you restart an iPhone,
good point.
You can't use your face or your finger at first. You first have to put in the code, and then subsequently you can use your face. So if you ever need to put it in a locked mode, you know, one that I hear attorneys talking about is coming through customs, because customs can be very aggressive on trying to get access to stuff. If you just want to make sure your things are locked. So again, who knows if you ever need to know those tips, but it's nice to have them in the back of your head just in case.
Absolutely. Well, I like the way Gruber says this. Sometimes he's a little more forceful than probably what he might need to be, but he says don't memorize this, internalize it, so you can do it without even thinking. You know, if the iPhone's in your pocket, just hold down that button, you know, as it comes out of your pocket, so that it requires then you to put in your passcode. And I appreciate the fact that he says that. I think it is a good thing just to keep in mind, just like you said, Jeff, not that you always need to be afraid of it, but it's a good thing just to make sure that, you know, if you ever suspect that there could be something, it's not a bad thing. It's just turning off the automatic Face ID or Touch ID to the point where it requires a passcode. And of course, there's even cases out there that no one can force you to reveal your passcode because it's an internalized password, and it's just good to know. But anyway, all of that point is, I didn't mean to dwell on it that long, but you already did a good job of talking about the aspect that the privacy and the security are baked in. It comes from Apple. We've said many, many times that we trust the way that Apple's approach many times because they have an excellent track record in this aspect. The only thing that I'm very disappointed about this announcement is that I'm not in one of the states that is going to be doing this. They've got Arizona, Connecticut, all these states, but it's not like Ohio yet where I am. I'm like, okay, come on, let's get on board here. I want to make this happen. This is good stuff here. So anyway, thanks for talking about that. And then in kind of a similar vein, one of the other stories that a lot of people were talking about, because that was a big one too, but John Gruber also talked about this, that a couple of other people talked about. We don't spend a whole lot of time on this, but in case people were seeing some of these headlines, that this is sort of the antitrust thing. A lot of companies for many years, like Netflix and certainly Spotify has been very vocal in this, or even Amazon from their Kindle app. One of the things that Apple has always required is that if a company wants to create an app and they want to sell you things in that app, such as a subscription, like if you want to open the Spotify app on your iPhone and you're not a subscriber, but you want to sign up as a subscriber, you could not do that inside the app. Now, technically, I guess that you could, but the companies didn't want you to do it in the app because if you did that, Apple would then require their 30% take on this, right? And in a similar way, I remember for me at least, I love the Amazon Kindle app on my iPhone, but I could never buy a book through the Amazon Kindle app. I'm not sure if Apple stopped that, but what, you can imagine Amazon would say, well, wait a minute, I don't want to sell a book through the Apple app because then Apple is going to take the 30% cut, which is what they would typically do. Anyway, there's a lot more nuance and other aspects and factions that are involved in here, but a lot of the stories, this actually came because of it was like the Japan Fair Trade Commission. They were bringing some kind of an investigation or a suit against Apple saying that they needed to do more from an antitrust, like you need to open this up a little bit more. And of course, we've heard this from the Fortnite people, right? The Epic lawsuit and some of the other companies. Anyway, Apple has conceded a little bit, if that's the right word, I'm not really sure, but at least to the Japan Fair Trade Commission. But they say they're going to open this up a little bit more now, even to in a worldwide or a global aspect. So John Gruber says Apple to relax anti-steering rules to allow, quote, reader apps to link to their websites for account creation and management. I don't know exactly how this is going to look, but it's it's an amazing step forward, because Apple has always said, if you want to be on our platform, you're going to play by our rules. And a lot of times that's the way it's always been. But now they seem to be relaxing this a little bit. And it'll be interesting to see how this is going to play out. If I'm then able to buy a Kindle book inside the Kindle app on my iPhone, that's pretty amazing for me. Like, I win as a consumer, right? I don't know exactly how that's going to go. But if I wanted to buy a movie from the Amazon, again, that's another thing. Like Amazon Prime, the movie or the video app, I can't buy a movie inside the app on my iPad or my iPhone, because they don't want Apple to take that cut. So we'll see how this plays out. But I just want to. There was a lot of headlines about this over this past week, and so we'll be following this and see how people are going to react to this, and basically how Apple's going to make it look like then at that point, which will be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's early times. Apple's always had a lot of restrictions on this stuff. I feel like for the App Store specifically, and for all of the Apple stuff, their first priority is always, I think, appropriately enough, themselves and what makes sense for Apple.
Right,
but second has been what makes sense for users, and then third has been what makes sense for the third parties that take advantage of Apple's platform to sell apps and stuff like that. But those third parties have been, complaining about making all sorts of complaints, and some of them have been reasonable. Some of them I personally think have been unreasonable. But yeah. I think Apple is just seeing that both in the United States and around the world, the regulatory agencies are hearing the lobbyists and hearing the complaints, and Apple is going to make some changes. And as you say, Brett, how it filters down and affects us as end users is to be determined. But hopefully it'll be a little bit better. So
this is what nice typically. Yeah, and I ran into this too. I wanted to join Spotify, and I would get a message similar to what I'm showing on the screen right now. This is from Netflix, but you would try to create a new account in Spotify on the app, and it would say, "Hey, can't do it here. We know it's a hassle. We know it's not the best way, but you need to go to a separate computer, a separate browser, and sign up there, and then when you get an account, then you can come back to the app." So
that if it can make it a little silly to me. So,
I know, and that's exactly what they are looking at. Hopefully it'll be a little bit easier on how it goes. But anyway, hopefully that helps some folks if you're kind of wondering what's going on there. We'll wait and see how that's going to filter out. A couple of bonuses real quick, Jeff. You linked to an excellent story. I haven't even finished reading it because I really wanted to kind of go back and read this a little bit more in depth. This was an excellent story about there's no escape from Facebook even if you don't use it. It's a little bit of a nerve-wracking story that it was actually a lawyer here, right? A 42-year-old lawyer, never had any friends, hadn't used Facebook on her phone for a couple of months or maybe a couple of years, but then this journalist was actually showing her all of the information that Facebook had on her, even when she hadn't been using the app. A little scary.
Suffice it to say that Facebook knows everything. That's the short version of the story. Do what you might to not give them your information. They're going to probably know it anyway.
It's going to get it. And it sounds like that it's because, other companies, from what I could just basically put together, other companies are paying Facebook for some of the information. Anyway, there is no privacy anymore, really, in a way. I mean, I guess you could try to get away from it, but anyway, this is a good story for folks to just read through if you're a little concerned about this. I thought the reporter here did a good job of kind of walking through what kind of information, and maybe even at the very end, I think he goes into a little bit about how you can find out what information that Facebook may have about you. So that's good. Thanks for linking to that story. And then the last bonus, quickly, this is a nifty little thing. I'm so glad you linked to this. This is, you and I have talked about Ted Lasso so many times, but this is a short 2-minute video you linked to about some of the behind the scenes, or what other people, what the audience is liking about Ted Lasso.
Yeah, it's fun. I resisted watching this video 2 months ago when it first came out because I thought it was going to have spoilers for season 2. It turns out it does not. It has some spoilers perhaps for season 1 if you haven't seen that yet. But it's fun to see a little bit of behind the scenes on how they're filming it, and also a discussion of how the principles, if it were, of Ted Lasso of looking out for each other and being kind are resonating. And goodness knows, in this day and age with pandemics and hurricanes and states doing crazy things, it's just a crazy world out there. We could all use a little Ted Lasso, and this video is a nice reminder of it. So I think it's 2 or 3 minutes. If you're looking looking for
good.
something just to cleanse your brain a little bit, check that one out.
To make you feel a little bit good. I just liked how it's the
Exactly.
actors talking about how audience, how people, random people have just, how it's changed their life, that people are being nicer to them. Or I think one of the actors said, it's just amazing. Like now when I interact with somebody, I thank them at the end. I was hoping that he would do that before, but anyway, that's good. Thanks for linking to that. Okay, in the know, a couple of tips. My first tip is you and I talked so much, I realized, about the Notes app on the iPhone and the iPad, Jeff, right? I love it. You and I have talked about it many times. It is basically my default method for capturing some information because it's handy, it's available. And for me, not only does it synchronize from my iPhone to my iPad and to my Mac, but I know a lot of our listeners don't use a Mac, right? You don't use one at work. You have one at home, and maybe there's a lot of folks out there that are the same way. So one of the things I wanted to at least just let people know that if you are using the Notes app on your iPad or your iPhone, and hopefully in a few weeks when iOS 15 comes out, you'll be using it on your iPad a little bit more for sure. You had another great article that you linked to about some of the features coming in iOS 15, Jeff. But I just wanted to let people know probably the easiest way. There's a couple of ways to get the iCloud Notes or the Notes app on your Windows computer. Probably the easiest way is to simply open up a web browser, go to iCloud.com, and when you get into that iCloud dashboard, as it were, you'll see your email and you'll see maps. You'll see all of the basic apps that are involved in iCloud.com, but one of the apps will also be the Notes app. Now, there's another way I'm going to tell you in just a moment that you can do it, but to me, this is probably the easiest way. I hate that you have to have it open inside a web browser, but if you do have notes and you're taking and capturing notes on your iPhone or your iPad, probably the easiest way to get access to those notes on a Windows computer, go to iCloud.com, sign in with your iCloud account, and you'll see the little Notes app there. You can click on that. And frankly, it really works the exact same way as you would expect on your iPhone or your iPad. And then if you needed to, you could copy and paste some of the text out of there, that kind of a thing. The other way that I see a lot...
But before you go to the other way, let me just highlight on this one. I had known about this, Brett, and I forgot about it until I saw you put this in the outline yesterday.
Oh, good.
And sure enough, last night I was using this Windows computer I have, and I wanted something from my notes. And rather than me typing it, I'm like, I can do this trick. And two things I'll note about notes. First is I love that when you sign into iCloud from anywhere, including this Windows PC I have, you have to authenticate on an Apple device. It says, we see somebody in this location of the world. And have a map. You trying to log into iCloud. Is this you? Is this? And I gave it the thumbs up. But it's just, I love the security of knowing that it is me logging into my iCloud. It's not somebody, some hacker around the world doing so. And then second of all, I noticed that it's incredibly useful. It looks just like an app. You can see all the information.
That's right.
I noticed, unless I just haven't figured this out yet, I have in my Notes app, like the notes that I use the most often are pinned. So they show up at the top. And I noticed that when I went to iCloud, they didn't have any pinning, which is fine. I just had to scroll. I had to scroll down a little bit to find them. So they were definitely there. It just, they weren't at the top. But having them there, and literally just last night I did it. I was able to copy something and then paste it in on the Windows PC. And I'm like, I'm so glad that I just learned this tip. So thank you. But go on. What's the next one?
Absolutely. Okay. Well, that's good. And you're right. Just to underscore that, you do have to have an actual Apple device, and typically it's your iPhone. And Apple does it a little bit differently than most times. Most times they'll text a code to you. Apple does it a little bit differently. It works within the iCloud, but it's pretty seamless. It'll make sense the first time you do it. But yeah, thank you. I forget about that. You do have to authenticate yourself. And then the second way, I admit, I don't know too much about this, but you're creating a progressive web app, and it's PWA. You can Google this and find out if you really want to do this. But basically all it's doing is that you're just making a little app or like a little wrapper to get access that is a website that goes only to iCloud.com. So if you're using these apps or getting access to your notes a lot, you might want to create a progressive web app in Windows 10. You either can do it from Microsoft Edge web browser or Google Chrome web browser. I'm not going to go through all the details. You can do it. You can do the Google and find out how to do that yourself. If you really wanted to do that, I feel like it would just be an extra step. if you only use it occasionally, like what you're talking about, Jeff, with you, I would just go to iCloud.com, open up a web browser, iCloud.com, and you can access it there. It'll be really easy to log in. So that's my tip. I just wanted people to know you can access your notes from your iCloud, from your iPhone and iPad on your Windows computer. And the best way to do that is just go to iCloud.com. Okay, my friend, how about a tip from you?
So my tip is something that we alluded to earlier when I lost all power and all cell service and everything else. I would have had no idea what was going on in the outside world, but for having a radio. And of course, nobody uses radios nowadays, but fortunately, in the beginning of this hurricane season, my old radio had stopped working. And so I bought a new one. The one that I picked out is one that was actually picked by Wirecutter as one of their picks, but it's called the Midland ER310. And you can get it on Amazon for $60. You're showing a picture of it there.
Yes.
And let me just tell you everything that this thing does. First of all, it has a built-in rechargeable battery that's 2600 milliamp hours. So you could before the storm. The nice thing about hurricanes is you have a little bit of notice, right? If it's from an earthquake, you're not going to have the notice. So you're just going to have to keep it ready. But for me, when I knew the hurricane was coming close, I plugged it into the outlet and I got it completely charged. Okay. So then once it's fully charged, I can use a radio for 32 hours or more, AM and FM radio, which worked great. But the thing is what happens if you still don't have, what if it runs out of power? Are you out of luck? No, because what this thing can do is, first of all, you can recharge the internal rechargeable battery with a crank that's on the side of it. So you can crank it. Now, admittedly, you have to do a lot of cranking to charge it, but you can at least do that. Or you can use a built-in solar panel on the top of it. And in fact, I noticed we were working on our backyard and I had the radio out there and it wasn't even under direct sunlight. And I was already seeing that it was recharging the battery. So I'm like, this is great. As I'm cleaning up all the tree branches in our backyard, my radio was recharging. Or it also can use AA batteries, 6 AA batteries, so, just like old school. But the point is, it's got many different ways to charge it, which was really nice. And so once you have it, what can you do with it? Well, of course, it's a radio, so you can listen to the radio. Here in New Orleans, for example, although I don't know how many FM stations are in New Orleans, dozens, but there were basically 2 things to listen to. About 10 of the stations were rebroadcasting the audio portion of our local NBC affiliate. And then a number of other stations were broadcasting of the one real big news station we have in New Orleans called WWL. So you could find, whatever FM or AM station picked that up best, you could then get news, which was great. But it's got some other cool little features too. Like it even has an emergency flashlight on it. It has a button you can press to do the SOS signal, dot, the strobe, it has an ultrasonic dog whistle so that if you were stuck in a place and you needed help, you could press a button and it would make a dog whistle sound just in case there were dogs out there looking for humans and stuff. It's got a USB port on the side that you can charge your iPhone. Now, it's not going to give you a lot of charge, but if your phone is dead and the cell service comes back and you need to talk to people. So this, in fact, I have had my video turned off as I've been talking, Brett, just to preserve the bandwidth. I'm going to start my video and we'll see if I start to break up too much. But maybe you could be able to see me a little bit. If am I on camera now? Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay. So this is my little prop.
Oh, there it is.
And it's great.
Oh, it's not that very big.
It comes out. It's very tiny. It's small. You can turn the crank and charge it. And I tell you, this little thing was my lifeline. And I'm so happy that we had it.
Really?
And so, thank you, radio. Thank you. So this is great. So, whether it's for a hurricane or another power outage or whatever disaster may come your way, it's $60. So it's not free, but I'm so happy to have it. And I'm sure it'll last for, 10 years. And then, I should also mention it's even got the weather alerts on it. So if you wanted it to get the weather alert channels, and there's an automated voice that reads weather, like a tornado warning, it will beep automatically if you have this turned on, if there's an emergency alert in your area. Now, of course, your iPhone will do the same thing. Will give you those alerts. But if you didn't have an iPhone, if your grandparents or something didn't have something, they could use something like this and just get the weather alert. So I was so thrilled to have this one little device in my possession. And so big thumbs up for me.
I'm so glad you jumped on video, because I guess I was imagining this was going to be a little bit bigger, but it's so handy. You're just tiny. In one hand, it's great for the flashlight. I love the fact that it's got not only a hand crank, which we see that in a lot of prepper situations, right? But it also has that solar panel too. And like you said,
the solar panel
you can just,
on top.
oh, that's so great. Oh, I'm so glad you shared that. That's what for something like this, it's good to have it in the and literally back maybe in your back pocket for any kind of a weather alert of any kind, right? I mean, especially we're a little bit out in the country, and we did have a storm that came through a couple of years ago, and we lost power for 2 or 3 days, or even in the wintertime, we get sometimes we lose power for a day or two. And just being able to have this, even for the flashlight aspect of it and the charging component, that's really great. Thanks for sharing that, Jeff. And thanks for being on. Oh my goodness, I cannot believe you're relocated and you are going as strong as ever. Anyway, stay safe, my friend, for the family and everything else. And of course, hopefully we'll get you back in New Orleans as soon as possible. We can kind Fingers of like crossed. Get back to normal. Yeah, no kidding. Thanks, crossed, Jeff. Yeah. Appreciate it. And hopefully we'll talk to you next week.
We shall see. It's a big question. Okay. Bye-bye, Brett. Bye-bye, everybody. Talk to y'all soon.